Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at Orbital Fire Cybersecurity for our webinar, Size Matters, Cybersecurity Strategies for Small Businesses. This is one of many educational events and posts that we share about small business cybersecurity. Please continue to follow us on LinkedIn, our YouTube channel. You could easily search for us, and certainly on orbitalfire.com. You'll see a plethora of resources, and we encourage you to check those out. And for today's session, before I introduce our speaker for today, we welcome questions. So please, you can use the comment function or you can use the QA function, and we'll make sure we get to everybody. With that, I would like to introduce our speaker, cybersecurity expert Reg Harnish. He's the CEO of Orbital Fire Cybersecurity, former founder and CEO of Grey Castle Security, and former CTO of Autotask, among many other accomplishments. Reg, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Other accomplishments may include a killer mac and cheese, but we'll get to that on a different webinar. Thank you for being here. I think most of you are new to Orbital Fire. I want to take a quick second and talk a little bit about who we are, why this particular topic is so important to us. About 4 years ago, the idea was born that somehow we could take all of these fancy, confusing, complex problems and solutions and right-size those for smaller organizations. And it sounded crazy until we started to do the analysis and really start to look at the market and what small businesses were struggling with, what tools and tactics and process was out there that might be scaled down to be effective yet low cost for small organizations. And so, once that fire, no pun intended, maybe a pun intended, was lit, for us, it was exciting times, because we knew that the entire cybersecurity industry had virtually forgotten small organizations. I'm going to talk about some important statistics here today. When you think about what's happened over the last, I've been in cybersecurity for maybe, 15 years or so, maybe a little bit longer. Cybersecurity was really born in the late 60s when the internet was being invented. And it started out with some very basic things. And then today we think about, what's happening with machine learning and AI and detection capabilities. So we've come a long way, but there have been some things that have really stagnated in the industry. And one of those is our ability to recognize the differences in needs of small organizations, and then also right-sizing and scaling these solutions to deal with those situations. So I just want to set the stage here a little bit and talk a little bit about the state of cybersecurity, really from the perspective of not just Orbital Fire, but I would say small business in general. And I in my experience, the small businesses that we run into, whether they remain prospects and friends or they become customers of Orbital Fire, a lot of them exhibit the same frustrations in this industry, and they may be motivated or incented or mandated to do certain things, but the reality is they just don't have a lot of options. So let's talk about that. First of all, according to McKinsey, and this is a couple of years old, and the statistics are, let's say, sporty at best, in $180 billion industry, right? So most of which is probably these days still shiny objects, right? Gadgets and tools and things, the blue pills. We've seen services pick up a little bit, but and then I think this number ranges anywhere from, I've seen a low of 160 to a high of like $400 billion per year. Obviously come a long way from 15 years ago when most people finished their cybersecurity program after they bought antivirus and a firewall. So we're making inroads. There's been some progress. However, there's a major issue with this $180 billion, and that is 100% of those dollars were spent by enterprise. Now, this is obviously well sourced, although impossible for us to know exactly what this number is. We can tell from outcomes, and we can tell from adoption and education and visibility that the vast majority, if not all, of this investment has been incurred from enterprise. And that would include like, medium enterprise and larger, certainly all the way up to Fortune 1000 organizations. And, that's because there are a few things underlying here that we need to recognize. So first, auditors and regulators aren't going after small businesses. So that compelling motivation for larger organizations has been pretty persistent throughout the years, right? There's an entire cottage industry formed around assessing, auditing, maybe penalizing larger organizations or anyone who isn't compliant with certain mandates, right? But auditors and regulators don't have the time to sit with a 15-person physician practice or a 75-person ball bearing manufacturer. There's no value for them. So small businesses are not feeling the pressure of federal mandates the way larger organizations do. Additionally, let's just put it right out there, SMBs have fewer resources. We hear it all the time. And I actually happen to think that money is the least important, although it may be the most tangible. Time and energy are far more important in cybersecurity than the money. In fact, most of what we do today, not only could you train a monkey to do it, but also it's a basic hammer and does not require a lot of, sophisticated flux capacitors and, sophisticated technology or tools that need to be purchased, right? But even so, of course, small businesses have fewer resources. They're smaller. But where we see it impacting most is in the inability to dedicate a resource to cybersecurity, but also to spend the time to not necessarily become an expert, but become familiar enough with cybersecurity so you know what a relevant program would look like. And you can kind of figure out like how much of this stuff should we do, what order should we do it in, those kinds of things. Small businesses just don't have that time. When we're working with a prospect or a potential customer or even our existing customers today, the decision makers might be doing payroll in the morning and selling in the afternoon. We're doing HR, they're running around. And so they don't have the time, they don't have the energy to spend on cybersecurity. But also from a vendor perspective, one of the reasons that all of these tools and services have been sold to enterprises because it's easier business. Let's face it, how many of you know a business that is really, really cleanly run, hyper efficient, profitable, well-cultured? It's a pretty rare animal to begin with. And that's no different in cybersecurity. So if you are a business that might be a little lethargic, lots of waste, lack of strategy or direction or leadership, selling to enterprise is much easier because they've got a lot of resources. They've got more resources, they have more pressure and incentive. And so not only that, but it's easier to run a sloppy business selling to enterprise. When you're working with small businesses, I can tell you from experience that you need to be hyper efficient. Process, automation, redundant, repeatability. These are things that are important, sort of going back to like the Lean Six Sigma type mentality where you don't have a lot of waste to wring out of the business. So a lot of reasons that this is happening, but over the last 15 years, in my experience, virtually every dollar, every hour, and every bit of soul has been invested in enterprise cybersecurity, not small business. But let's look at what the impact is. So if you believe the United States Census 2020, there were 32.8 million businesses in this country. Let's look at the breakdown. So here they are. This is small business, and this is big business. The numbers are staggering. There are 200,000 small business or large businesses in this country, and there are 32.2 million small businesses. So now what does this mean? If we agree on the census numbers, and we agree that it's mostly enterprises or large business that is spending money or investing in cybersecurity, then we can combine those and say that $180 billion in the industry has been spent solving 0.13% of the problem. 98.7% of all businesses in this country qualify as small business. 0.1% are large businesses. So all 180 billion has gone to 0.3% of the problem. And so as an industry, we're kind of sitting around saying, well, why aren't we making more progress? This is confusing. The reality is, as an industry, we have completely ignored almost the entire problem. When I say the entire, meaning if you rounded it to the nearest whole number, it would be 100%. This is a real challenge. Now, the numbers go on. So 60%, 66% of all cyber attacks, apparently, again, statistics are difficult in this industry, but the number that we sort of kick around, and I think we're commonly accepted, is around 2/3 of all cyber attacks affect small businesses. The industry wants you to be scared. However, this is actually great news for small businesses. Let's do the math. If there are 200,000 large businesses and 32.2 million small businesses, and 1/3 of the problem goes to the 200,000 and the other 2/3 of the problem go to the 32.2 million, that means a big business will experience 0.5 attacks per day. So one every other day, one significant attack every other day. For small businesses, though, it's alarmingly low. Now, the industry doesn't want you doing the math, but we're here today because small businesses have huge advantages. I mean, massive advantages over larger organizations. We're going to talk about how do we tease some of these advantages out, but ultimately, where it leads you as a small business is in a position where cybersecurity can truly become an asset and truly have value for your organization. In big business, and I spent 10 years of my life doing nothing but selling services to cybersecurity services to large organizations, I can tell you that it's difficult to tell one program from another because they're doing a lot of the same things. They've bought a lot of the same tools. They have adopted a lot of the same frameworks. Small businesses, you have a massive, massive opportunity right now because virtually none of your competitors, none of your contemporaries, your peers, your supply chain has built a meaningful program. That is a huge differentiator for you. So when we talk about, the advantages of big business, I don't see them. In fact, there's a lot of disadvantages. One, they're immeasurably complex, meaning an organization like Walmart has so many assets, so much data, so many network connections, so many supply chain partners, so many providers and vendors and employees, and the list goes on and on and on, to inventory and then potentially secure each one of those assets is virtually impossible. And I would, that is basically a fact. There's no way from Walmart to secure every asset appropriately because there's too much. And on top of that, once you have enough of that surface area and that complexity, everything is also changing. So it's kind of like the Golden Gate Bridge dilemma, where painters start on one end. By the time they get to the other end, where they started is completely rusted and they got to start over. Walmart is in a very similar issue where no matter what they do, can they manage risk? Of course. Can they reduce risk appropriately? I would argue no. Second is their battleships. And so moving a small business, even to make a big business, even to make a decision on cybersecurity can be months long, maybe years long. And then, of course, you're invested in once a technology or a process is implemented, it takes a lot to undo that or to change it. So they move very, very slowly, glacially. Then one of the most critical issues is that big businesses really lack accountability because there are armies of people working on the same problem. It's very difficult at times to say who's responsible, who's accountable for this, like whose job is it to make sure that this works or that to measure this or to make those decisions. So big businesses, again, big problems. On the small side, so what are the things that we look for in a good customer or a good potential customer? A few things. One is you're one of many, right? So when you recognize that, and that is partly part of your strategy, right? It's like the wildebeest crossing the Serengeti. There are 6 million of those and about 500 lions. And so the likelihood, if you're smart, of outsmarting and avoiding lions is actually not all that difficult. And because of your size, you're smaller, you're fast, you're nimble. All of these things sort of lend to your ability to survive and to be viable and to be successful. The next is you're invisible. Mandates like PCI start at around 6 million transactions per year. This is just one of thousands of examples where the regulatory, federal, state, commercial mandates, these things aren't really looking at small businesses. You're not on their radar today. So even enforcement in industries where we hear a lot or where regulation has been around for many years, like healthcare, that 15-person physician practice is not experiencing the kind of pressure or scrutiny that a big business would, or a hospital system or a surgical network. And so not to say that you should be skirting your responsibility there, because we feel differently. However, you can do it in a way that makes sense to your business, right? You kind of build out your plan as it makes sense to you at a pace, at a cadence that your business can afford and one that you can do well, right? But you're generally invisible to a lot of the regulators and auditors. And then last is that small businesses turn on a dime. You could literally build a program and implement a half a dozen services in a couple hours. Like there's no filtering, there's no bureaucracy, there's no fat, there's no anything. Like you are nimble and you're small and you are you have very little complexity, very little surface area. And so these decisions can be made quickly and effectively. That's a big part of this. Is response time is critical in cybersecurity, regardless of what you're doing. Now, even though the $180 billion has not really filtered down to small businesses yet, what has filtered down is many of the challenges that enterprises have felt for now decades. Let me talk about a few of them. The first, keeping your best customer. Your supply chain wants to know what you're doing about cybersecurity. And that's in particular if you're in manufacturing for the DoD, or you are in financial services and you are managing non-public information, financial account information, or you're in healthcare. Your biggest customers, because they are being held accountable, now need to push cybersecurity down through their supply chain, even to the smallest vendor. And so you're getting questionnaires. Try getting cyber insurance today without, a full contact sport. Those applications have gone through the roof. Some of them are 5 pages, 10 pages. So you're not escaping that anymore. It's keeping you from getting insurance. Your contracts, so bidding on that next RFP or your ability to sell your product or service is almost always now coming with some basic fundamental bit of cybersecurity requirements, whether it's the right to audit, or you've got to produce like a SOC 2 certification, or they want to know that if their data that you've just taken custody of is compromised in some way, that you're going to report it back to them in 72 hours. A lot of contractual language is out there now. New business inquiries are very similar. In some industries, like manufacturing and the DoD supply chain, it's intense. So you're oftentimes not even allowed to bid. Not only can you not win the work, but you're not even, allowed to play. Then, of course, we are starting to see fate and federal regulations. I'll leave it there. start to move down and cascade to smaller organizations, primarily if you're working with larger organizations or if you've experienced an incident, which brings me to my last one, which 66% of all cyber attacks apparently affect small organizations. That was not the case 10 years ago, right? Where, you know, our adversaries were really focused on larger businesses because they needed to make it work. Well, the economics of cybercrime has changed dramatically through automation. I won't use the AI term, but certainly it's easier to conduct cybercrime over the internet now and less expensive than it was 10, 15 years ago. And so now, because of those economics changing, it's actually feasible to start moving down that market, that spectrum, into smaller and smaller organizations. We know that everyone who's attending today is experiencing at least 3 of these issues, and probably on a regular basis. So we have an industry that has completely abandoned small businesses. We have statistics that are difficult to leverage usefully to make decisions in our business. However, we're starting to experience a lot of the same issues that large businesses have been dealing with for a very long time. Okay, so that's kind of where we are. And again, we exist. Orbital Fire exists because we recognized that this was going to be the pattern, 4.5 years ago. When we started going through, market analysis and looking at what's the addressable market and what's the appetite for small businesses to start looking at cybersecurity as an asset, or even begrudgingly, right? Where you're getting dragged into cybersecurity and you hate it, which, okay, we get it. One way or another, you're being forced to do this, whether it's from your board, your supply chain, or some other pressure. There are ways to outsmart the system. And I want to talk about a few of these, but please, we love a challenge. If you have questions about some of these, I'm going to stay kind of high level, throw them in the chat, throw them in the Q&A. Let's talk about these, because this is stuff that isn't really being discussed for small businesses today. The first strategy comes down to requirements. When you build a cybersecurity program, there's a few basic steps that you take before you start building. The first is you got to know what data you have, right? Where are the crown jewels? How many do we have? Where are they? Who has access to them? Some basic things like that. But then also, what are we required to do? Now, those requirements may come in a lot of different avenues. Could be a contract. It could be a federal mandate or a state mandate. It could be from a cyber insurance application. All of these pursuits that your small business is, sort of charging after, most of those have some cybersecurity baggage. Your job now is to look across each one of these, repositories, these deposits of requirements, and inventory those. Just make a spreadsheet. And whether it's 5 issues or requirements, or it's 500, make that list. Because from there, you're going to start to look and prioritizing your efforts. Again, going back to a lack of resources, that means you have to prioritize. You have to be smarter. You have to be more efficient. However, when you make the decision quickly, I might add, it's much more easy to mobilize and affect real change because you don't have the complexity or the surface area. But understanding those requirements gives you the ability to see the picture and then start to prioritize. And what you're going to say to yourself is, okay, where is cybersecurity the biggest hurdle in my business? Am I getting pummeled by questionnaires? Am I getting pummeled by my board? Am I struggling now to meet basic minimum requirements in my statement of work or my proposals for new potential customers? What's happening? Where are the biggest headaches? Go through those inventory, go through those requirements and say, okay, of these 20, numbers 1, 4, 7, and 15, these are killing me right now. And if I could just fix these things, I'd be in a better position to be a successful business, meet my, deliver on my mission, meet my goals, whatever those things are. But until you know what those requirements are, it's very difficult, because cybersecurity, most of these frameworks, they're designed for Walmart. Some of them have over 1,000 different controls, 1,000 different things that you can do in cybersecurity. So if you think it's this cloud, this vapid mass is going to somehow, present itself to you in a, profound, explainable way, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to go after this. So start with those basic requirements. Go through, think about the questions that you've been asked in cybersecurity over the last 6 months. Which ones are happening most frequently and which ones are most impactful when you say, no, I don't have that. I'm not training my people, or I'm not doing immutable backups, or I don't have multi-factor deployed, or I don't have an incident response plan. Whatever those things are, they are the hurdles that you are after today. So strategy number one is inventory these requirements. And I'm not talking about, just to be clear, I'm not talking about best practices and frameworks in cybersecurity. I'm talking about the boots on the ground places where cybersecurity has kept you from being a successful business or being as successful as you could be. Those are your requirements, not NIST 53, not ISO 27, not PCI. What's happening in your business today? Let's figure out where is cyber impacting your business today. Number two, there are two goals in cybersecurity. So now that we've got our inventory and our priority, you're going to focus on building your program in the pursuit of two things. The first is defensibility. We're kind of already talking about this, but defensibility means doing enough of the right things in the right order so that when a third party asks you about your cybersecurity program and you tell them, well, they better be satisfied. They better shake their head and say, yep, we can work with you, or yes, we'll give you insurance, or we'll underwrite your policy, or yes, we'll continue buying ball bearings from you, whatever those things, those goals are. But defensibility is about putting yourself in a defensible position when there is scrutiny on your program. The counter to that, of course, the yang to the yin, is resilience, which is doing enough of the right things in the right order such that cybercrime and other undesirable things, cyber-related things, ransomware, wire fraud, stolen device, compromised credentials, a breach of protected data, whatever those things are for your business, when they happen, that you are able to minimize the disruption, the loss, the opportunity cost, the damages, the penalties. Resilience is about taking a hard punch and getting back to business quickly. Now, again, when we're looking through this inventory of requirements that you've already put together, some of them are going to contribute to both. Some will contribute only to one. In the areas where you feel like a requirement may not contribute to either, that should be at the bottom of your list, because these are the two primary goals that we're going after. And I would argue that if you could only pick one of these, it would be defensibility. And I'll probably regret this because I don't really have a good basis in fact or data on this. But in my opinion, at the small business level, more attention is paid to the perception of your cybersecurity program than the actual efficacy of it. And so every business makes their own decision on what's important, and what their risk tolerance is, and what they're going to pursue. But I would say if you're on the fence and you can only afford one, defensibility is where it's at today for small businesses. That's not going to be the case forever. And I'll probably regret saying this next year. Now, there is this process at the middle of cybersecurity called risk management. And most of the purists in this industry, most of the experts and the professionals and the people who are conducting these types of things look at this and they look at a control catalog, like a best practice like NIST. And they say, okay, there's 1,100 controls here. Risk management will tell me which order do I need to do all of those in. But they're wrong. This is not about doing all 1,100 things in cybersecurity. In fact, it's the exact opposite. So while most of the industry starts with 1100 controls and then starts to whittle away and say, okay, all right, maybe this doesn't make sense for your small business, or maybe this is not as relevant, or maybe there's not a lot of value here, and chipping away, starting at 1100 and chipping away, we recommend doing the exact opposite, which is start at 0 and then figure out exactly of those 1100 things that you can do in cybersecurity, which ones are going to create value for you, which ones can become an asset, which ones will help build defensibility and resilience and meet these requirements that are negatively impacting your business every single day. Your job, and if you're doing risk management well, is to do the absolute minimum in cybersecurity that you can without jeopardizing the mission of the business, right? Why you exist. Cybersecurity is getting in the way. It's compromising your business. It's making it more difficult. However, doing the absolute minimum can be a stretch for some. And most customers, most small businesses that come to us are doing less than the absolute minimum, and it is jeopardizing their business. However, we know that cybersecurity can be confusing, overwhelming, demanding, all sorts of things. And part of that is this perception that I have to do a million things and I'm never going to be done and I'm not going to be able to measure it. But we're here to tell you that that is the wrong approach. This is about building from the ground up, starting at 0, and then building cybersecurity assets that deliver value to your business. And whether it's getting an insurance policy or keeping your best customer, everything you do in cyber, there should be value to it. So think about doing the absolute minimum. This should be a breath of fresh air, a relief to you that you don't have to think about doing 1100 things. That's nonsense. And it's particularly nonsense for smaller organizations. Again, yet another advantage of your size and your simplicity. Number 4, have a plan. So at some point, the first 3 strategies are going to fail you. You're going to get a surprise requirement. You're going to experience ransomware. You're going to your number's going to be up from your financial auditors, and there's going to be a desk side audit. At some point, you're going to be pulled outside of your comfort zone, and it happens. This is just the way it is, and in particular in an industry that is yet so immature. Like we're still all just figuring this out. So it's important that you at least discuss, and I would say on an annual basis, your leadership, your fiduciaries, maybe the heads of departments, HR, finance, who's managing the shop floor, who's seeing patients, your chief medical officer, who's handling title searches, whatever those individuals are. Get together on an annual basis and say, what do we do if X happens? We have no plan for this, right? It's not one of our requirements. It's not really adding to our defensibility, so we haven't invested in this thing. What happens if and when this occurs to our business and it's having impact? Oftentimes, just talking it through can create muscle memory, can reduce the fear and the anxiety and the panic around something like that, and make you more capable of responding to it. Now, this isn't just about cyber. This is really about, an example is in the manufacturing industry, there's a lot of chaos around these federal regulations for manufacturers who are in the DoD supply chain. And the requirements continue to change. And so small manufacturers are like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, listen, let's build a program based on strategies 1 through 3. And then if and when your prime or your subprime says you must conduct incident response tabletops on an annual basis, well, we have a plan for that. We have a plan for when we're stretched beyond our existing trajectory and the things that we have already agreed to do. And again, having that plan and just socializing this idea that cybersecurity We have a program. Here's how we're approaching it, much more pragmatically and effectively than is being preached to you from the industry. But here's what we're going to do in the event that something completely unexpected comes up. Just do that on an annual basis. Have a plan for when things get sideways for your organization. And then again, from a size perspective, I can't tell you how many times I was either selling to a Fortune 10,000 organization or delivering services to, a huge corporation, and no one really even knew who to talk to. No one knew who was responsible or could make a decision, or most things were done by committee. You have the ability today, unlike all of these large businesses, to this afternoon go back to your office, call a Zoom meeting and say, Alice from finance is now responsible for cybersecurity in our organization. Putting a name on something makes it much more likely to get done and much more likely to be successful. No different than anything else in life. Putting someone's name on it, making someone accountable, almost ensures better performance, period. That's a human thing. That's genetic. That's DNA. That has nothing to do with cybersecurity. Put someone's name on it. Now, the good news is Alice doesn't need to be a cybersecurity expert. In fact, we would be shocked if anyone in your small business is a cybersecurity expert. That's not necessary. And while we are seeing language change in some of the regulations to suggest that the decision makers, even at small businesses, must be familiar enough with cybersecurity concepts to make informed decisions, Alice is only accountable. She's not the person doing the work. She doesn't have to be. Now, you may say, well, there's no one out there that can help me with things. And I can tell you that you're basically right. All the technology is designed for big business. It's big, it's complex, it's expensive, it takes months to deploy, armies of people to maintain. I get it. You're right. The service providers, their hourly rates are, if you thought your attorney was bad, try, affording a cybersecurity expert, or especially one that's conducting incident response in an emergency scenario. So we get it. Those things are not designed for you. We understand and we agree. But we exist today, and this is not a pitch, but there is a way. If nothing else, we have proven that there is a viable, low-cost, effective, right-sized pursuit and approach for small businesses to tackle cybersecurity. So Alice doesn't need the time or the energy. All she needs is the money to do it. And some accountability, right? That's why this actually works, is because people feel responsible and accountable. 5 basic strategies, and none of those at all require any level of cybersecurity expertise, but they will make you far more successful. You can do all of those today. There's no homework necessary. You don't need any certifications. There's no special tactics or tools. Like, anyone can do those 5 and essentially increase your odds of success tenfold. But I have a couple of final thoughts, and then I'll turn it over to Dana for some questions. The industry, that $180 billion, wasn't really that hard. Once big businesses got scared, once there was fear, compliance penalties, or there was unknown, most of those organizations threw money at the problem, or threw people at the money. And I would say there's been a bit of a gold rush in cybersecurity. But because of that, this draft has pulled all of the numbers completely away from small business to larger organizations. So there's really 2 things to consider here. The statistics, first of all, that come out that are published by the industry, they're only concerning big business. They have nothing to do with you. In some cases, they're exactly the opposite. These are not small business statistics. Don't believe those. The second problem that we have in this industry around statistics is no one wants to report for two reasons. One, I'm not going to share my dirty laundry about paying a ransom last quarter. And two, I'm not going to tell this story of a lack of success or frustration or dead ends on my cybersecurity program because I spent $2 million on a tool. I spent 9 months implementing it and then finally pulled the plug because there was no end in sight. Those statistics have nothing to do with you. And honestly, your opportunity right now is to create new statistics for small organizations. And I love that idea because a little bit of competition goes a long way, but I do feel like small businesses in just a short period of time, and I'm guessing like 3 to 5 years, when you look at the statistics for big business versus small business is going to look like the rock stars. You're going to get all the gold medals, all the praise, all the recognition because small businesses can meaningfully affect and manage their risk because they're small. So ignore the statistics, carve your own path, right? Find your own journey because these are not about you. And then my last thought here is, for me, one of the most compelling, because when we think about the investments, the $180 billion that the top 200,000 companies in this country have invested, and yet we look at each one of them and we can't tell them apart. Cybersecurity just gets lost in this huge morass of people and computers and locations and countries. And let me tell you something, at the small business level, if you, as a 25-person ball bearing manufacturer in the DoD supply chain, if you have built a defensible and resilient cybersecurity program, guess who's getting the work? If you are a small healthcare practice that might be interested in some kind of exit or is, working towards grant programs, or guess who's getting the money? If you are a real estate firm or a law firm or a mortgage lender or a landscaping firm even, if you've built a cybersecurity program where your customers trust you with their data and possibly their reputation and other sensitive information, and they value that, then guess who's getting the work? It's you. Because at the smallest end of the market, there are very few small businesses doing cybersecurity. You would be first to the game, and all of that advantage will go to you. And whether that's competitive or you're reducing costs, reducing disruption, improving your reputation, your ability to attract top talent, how fast you can respond to questionnaires, the premium that you're paying for insurance, these things have real dollars and cents impact on small businesses today. Selling more of your stuff, spending less on costs, reducing penalties, better premiums, for the list just goes on and on and on. You have a huge opportunity today to be the first mover of your small business community and do something meaningful in cybersecurity. Doesn't mean doing all 1,100 things. It means doing enough of the right things in the right order that you have built a program that is an asset and a value to your small business. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I will turn it back to Dana to see if any questions came in.
Sure. Thanks so much, Reg. We have one question so far. Please, everyone, you can use the Q&A or the comment section. So I have somebody here that has asked, so with all that you've said, how much should small businesses budget for cybersecurity? Because, I think you said at the beginning, money is an issue.
Yeah. That is a difficult question to answer. A couple of things that you should not do. You should not make cybersecurity part of your IT budget. 2/3 of cybersecurity has nothing to do with technology. So that would not make sense at all. Think about instead, what would it be worth to you to working backwards from saying yes to that, that RFP or to the, cyber insurance application or to a questionnaire or to your board, or what would it be worth to you if you could work backwards and have these certain things implemented and effective? Is it 1%? Is it 8%? I don't know. And every business is different. And of course, even at the small business level, every one of you has a different profitability, and margin. And so there's no one answer. But what I can tell you is it has nothing to do with IT in most cases. So do not make it part of your IT budget. Cybersecurity should be as separate from IT as payroll or HR or anything else. But instead, work backwards. We know that resources are limited. So work backwards from your goals to figure out, what would it take? Another question to ask is, do I need it today? Or can I build this over the next 12 months, right? So beyond 12 months, that planning horizon starts to get real fuzzy. But I would say, think about the next 6 to 12 months, anticipate what your demands are going to be from a cybersecurity standpoint, and move towards those so that you can respond positively when you're asked about those things. And it could be something as simple as HIPAA compliance, or as complex as HIPAA compliance, or something as simple as, are you training your people? Figure out those requirements, going back to that inventory, and then kind of imagine yourself 6 or 12 months down the road, getting those increasing demands for those types of things, and then figure out, well, what would it actually take? What would it be worth for me to do those things so that I can respond in the affirmative when I'm asked? It's not a prescriptive answer, but using those guidelines, every small business in this webinar should be able to come up with their own, let's call it a draft budget. So let's say you spend whatever, 100 grand next year, or 10 grand, or 2%, or whatever it is. Start there and then continue to fine tune those numbers.
Thank you. Reg, one more question that I think came out of that. You say that this should not be part of the IT budget. My IT provider says they've got our cybersecurity covered. What questions should I be asking, or how can I vet that?
Yeah. That is because most small businesses are outsourcing their IT. And because IT providers generally, and no fault of their own, cybersecurity is a massive domain, but many IT providers think that cybersecurity looks like a firewall and antivirus, and maybe multi-factor if they're progressing. But the reality is, if you look at whether you're in healthcare or you've adopted a best practice like NIST or something similar, anywhere from 2/3 to 80% of cybersecurity has nothing to do with technology. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's confusing to begin with. Even with your IT provider, they're not exposed to cybersecurity, certainly not the full realm of cybersecurity. So if your MSP or IT provider comes and says, hey, I got you covered, ask hard questions. Well, what is it that you have covered? Can you be more specific about what you're doing? Because I see 1,100 things and only 200 of them are technology. What about policy or incident response or governance or compliance, and the list goes on. And I think what you'll find is that your IT provider, even though I'm no doubt they're smart, well-intentioned people, that at some point they're going to say, yeah, I don't got any of that. Because it has become a very different, those are very different practices, and we approach them completely differently for the same reason that we don't even attempt technology at all, because there's no way for us to be good at both. And I think small businesses are getting educated on, well, not only would you not hire your landscaper to do cardiac surgery, but you wouldn't even probably go to your general physician for it either. this is a real specialized area, just like other parts of your business. Find specialists that can help you.
That's great. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Reg, I appreciate your time, and I'd love to tell everyone that if you leave here, think about what Reg has said today, and you do have questions, please reach out to us. You can direct message us. You've got reg@orbitalfire.com, and we'd love to have a conversation or answer any questions that you have. Anything else, Reg?
No, that's it. Appreciate your time today. We love this topic. Obviously, we're passionate about it. There is hope. Things are getting better for small businesses, and we are excited about the future.
It's great. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for attending.
Thank you, everyone.